Hello and welcome to This Week in Bitcoin, brought to you by Relay Private. If you look at this week, the Bitcoin price is moving sideways. It's kind of boring. Nothing is really happening in terms of price news. However, if you take a closer look under the hood, you'll see that there's a lot that happened this week. But before we get into the positive things, let's just list the negative stuff right at the gate. Firstly, as I mentioned, the price is just hovering between 75.5K, sometimes reaching 58K to 58K gang is just not going away. Then it goes up a bit, but it usually comes back to these same levels. It's just going in sideways. What does this mean? Does this mean that people are not interested? Do people don't have any money? Most likely, people are just enjoying summertime. Summer has always been a time for Bitcoin where there's not a lot that happened. If you also take a closer look at stuff like Google Trends and you look for keywords such as buy Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin as a whole, you'll see that the interest in it is at the same levels as just before the ETFs launched back in January. The only countries in the world where there's a keen interest in Bitcoin are El Salvador, not surprising with their Bitcoin law, Switzerland, and why that is, I get into in a second, and Nigeria, who's in the past has always been very much involved with Bitcoin. So if you look at the entire thing, the market sentiment seems a bit low. It seems uninterested. Generally speaking, everyone is sort of going, meh, there's not a lot that happens. However, if you do take the closer look under the hood, you'll soon discover that there's so much going on and everything is actually pointing in the right direction. I mentioned Switzerland, and obviously as a Swiss company, we have to talk about the news out of there. This week, the Zurich Cantonal Bank, which is the cantons, famously 26 in Switzerland, everyone has their own bank. And these banks are sort of the, let's say, go-to standard for people who just get their regular paychecks. They live in their own cities or in their own villages. And it's a very much trusted institution for a lot of citizens who just want a regional banking partner. They are following along the Zuger Kantonalbank and the Lucerne Kantonalbank, with which we had an interview a couple of weeks ago in our podcast, where they're now offering crypto and especially Bitcoin to their customers, meaning it will be incredibly easy for these customers to buy Bitcoin and hold it in a dedicated account at their bank. Does this mean that that's self-custody? Definitely not. The custodian will be the bank. And obviously, it will not be the same thing as actually holding Bitcoin in something like your Relay wallet or a hardware wallet. However, it's a step in the right direction. With this, the Zurich Cantonal Bank is actually following the Postfinance Bank, which is one of the larger banks in Switzerland. The Zurich Cantonal Bank, by the way, as well. And they're sort of in this mix where it's not system critical to the banking infrastructure, whatever these guys do, but it sets the trend what the big guys are doing as well. Raiffeisen and UBS/CS/ the biggest bank in Swiss history have not yet announced that they're going into the same direction. But if you take a look and see that Postfinance, which is doing well with their offering, now Zurich, Lucerne, Zug, cantonal banks are doing the same, and the interest just keeps growing. It's only a matter of time until the big boys also react. And the bigger news in this context is that in order to get this approved, these banks, Postfinance, Zurich, Zug, Lucerne, cantonal banks, they had to speak to the regulators, which is in Switzerland, the FINMA. And if you speak to them, and we can tell you that that is quite a journey because you have to clear up and explain a lot of moving parts because it is different to what the banking world is usually known to. There are rigorous checks and rigorous things these banks had to do to get the approval of the regulators that is actually possible to offer these offerings. Meaning going forward, there's a very high likelihood that the big boys, Raiffeisen and UBS/CS/Megabank, are actually following pursuit, and that we will soon see more and more banking clients who are interested in Bitcoin. Now, why is this a big news? Firstly, it makes the barriers to actually entering much more easier. I know it's with a bank, it's custodian, it's not real Bitcoin, but you have to start somewhere. It will increase advertising spend, it will increase the perception of Bitcoin amongst citizens. And then if you combine these news, very bullish news, with the actual on-chain metrics, we have a new all-time high in the hash rate. We see more and more wallets being created. More and more people are actually holding and not selling their Bitcoin. And you see the ETF inflows coming back and just that institutional interest growing. It leaves us in a very unique place in time now in the Bitcoin history, where for the first time, it's not actually retail completely that's driving the increase in Bitcoin adoption, but rather institutional. And that institutional adoption has been something that has been always missing. We at Relai also see this push. This week alone, we closed the biggest deal in our Relai private team, our OTC offering, where someone has set a new company record in actually getting Bitcoin. We also see this in the amount of Bitcoin that's being sold. People are slowly getting back into it. And for the first time, as I've mentioned, it seems like institutional and accredited investor pressure is growing. They are really keen in Bitcoin. They're starting to do all of these offerings. They're starting to increase the eyeballs on Bitcoin. And it's just a matter of time until retail is also following pursuit. Looking at all of that bullishness, perfect on-chain data, institutional adoption growing, interest is there, and then checking the price, you would figure, well, it's not really working. But I'm here to tell you, if this consistent inflow and all of that interest keeps growing, we are in for a golden autumn. Doesn't mean golden in terms of price, but all of these metrics build the perfect foundation for a future where the Bitcoin network will continue to grow. There's a lot of patience now required. I know the sideways movement is quite horrible because you look at it and go like, well, that's not much happening. But looking at these news, looking how everything is growing, and looking how all of these pieces come together, I am quite certain that we will have an exciting time ahead and a time where Bitcoin is really showing its true powers. I don't want to bore you here too long for the video. I want to leave it at this bullish quote and at this bullish sentiment. Everything under the hood looks incredibly solid. Institutional adoption is coming. It's just a matter of time until retail is coming. And we really need to wait it out for the next few weeks and months to see what all of this institutional growth is actually doing for the Bitcoin network. You know the drill. If you got questions or feedback or just want to say hello, you can always leave a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you next week again.